case. Here to unwrap what was found, Dr. Chad Kelman, Chief of Radiology at St. Mary's Medical Center in West Palm Beach. Chad, it is great to have you here. The question I have at first is, how did this mummy make it over to St. Mary's?
It's a good question. Very good question. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for having St. Mary's. It came to us because of a relationship, which a lot of things can occur that way. It came to us through the curator, through the museum, having a very good relationship with one of our physicians on staff at St. Mary's. And when we heard of the opportunity, we were very happy to take it on.
Can I ask you, how many people did it take to unwrap this mummy?
Very dramatic. Very nice. We have a team of physicians in our radiology department. Dr. Michael Katz is our chief pediatric radiologist. Between himself and myself reviewing the images, we came up with our hypothesis. And you have to understand, which I know at this point everybody has, is since the organs have been removed from this mummy, it does make it quite challenging. However, the skeletal features very well preserved. So obviously that during the process of mummification, they were able to do that. And due to the previous time when they looked at images for the mummy, CAT scan was just beginning. It was really in its infancy. So they didn't have the opportunity, and they started 20, 30, 40 years ago with just x-rays. And through the x-rays, they came up with their hypothesis. So we were able to, through CAT scan, validate some areas that they looked at, debunk some areas, correct it, and then provide our own hypothesis based on the imaging that we had.
So with modern medical imaging and your own intellectual rigor, I hate to use the pun, we're dying to know what killed the mummy.
You liked using
it. I'm sorry. Well, throw the flag on me. Intentional pun by Anchor. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Doc.
No, it was good. Well said. So what we were able to see was we were able to look at the areas of the mid upper back where we saw on an x-ray from 34 years ago that part of the spine was missing. Turns out in the mummification process, it wasn't removed and it didn't disappear through infection, as if they thought back then maybe tuberculosis. It actually was shifted due to the poor fusion or brittle fusion of the bones, and at a young age, which we're able to also come through the imaging and the dental features and the skeletal features with an age of 2.5 to 3.5, as opposed to the previous thought was 4 to 9 years old. Because of this fusion being very brittle at this young age, they moved in the process of mummification. And those bones moved into the right chest during the process. And what we saw in the right upper quadrant and the abdomen upper aspect was this tiny, round, well-defined calcification. And those calcifications on more of a living type of creature, many times if it were an appendicolith, it would be stuck and blocking that appendix. And through that, distension can happen and the appendix can rupture. And our hypothesis is that's probably what occurred. And the ruptured appendix leading to appendicitis and a infection in the abdomen. Back then, they may have wrote it out. Some children, adults with a low-grade appendicitis that don't rupture may do okay. In this case, if it ruptures, though, it could develop, unfortunately, a fatality in the end.
Doctor, let's ride on that idea a little bit here. Through this sort of ancient discovery, did you learn anything which could serve for future medical information from this discovery?
Other than the fact it is a quite common finding. We see appendicitis often. It's treated much more aggressively in our modern era. What we can really hypothesize is that the treatment options back then were limited. Treatment options with vaccines were not even around. So we've done much better through science over the years of treating or preventing many illnesses.
But in terms of, for lack of a better term, their mortuary science, the preservation of the mummy.
Sure.
There's some thinking that the Egyptians, in some ways, even without technology, were, quote, kind of ahead of us when it came to preserving bodies.
Yes. Except again for the organs. The organs, because of the process, are removed, but the skeletal features are phenomenal. I mean, very well preserved. Better than if you didn't do the mummification process. I mean, you can see the baby teeth. You can see the unerupted teeth underneath the baby teeth. Skeletal features are great, are good enough that we feel very confident that trauma was not a reason. We don't see any evidence of fractures that occurred either accidentally or non-accidentally. And in that regard, yes, I absolutely agree. The skeletal feature is very well preserved.
Dr. Chad Kelman, we all kidding aside, we talk about Halloween, but this is a little girl who had appendicitis, and we've gained some insights from her remains and from you being here. Chad, we thank you very much for coming in and being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
We're going to turn our attention now to the midterms, a big congressional race in Florida. That's the subject of this report from our Newsmax election team.
Florida's Congressional District 18 is on paper red. There are more registered Republicans than Democrats. But that doesn't mean much considering a Democrat, Patrick Murphy, currently represents the district. Republican challenger Carl Domino hopes to change that. Working in Domino's favor is the fact that registered Republican voters edge out the Democrats, and Republicans are more likely to head to the polls in greater numbers for midterm elections. But Murphy has his own advantages as well, and that's a good thing for Murphy, who demonstrated in his freshman term on that he's not afraid to break with the party, even when it comes to key issues. He called out the president for gutting Medicare Advantage to pay for Obamacare, and he was one of just 6 Democrats who voted to hold former IRS official Lois Lerner in contempt of Congress. As always, it'll come down to which voters show up on Election Day. Murphy barely eked out a win in 2012 when he took on outspoken Republican incumbent Allen West. Interestingly enough, despite a Democrat winning the congressional seat, voters wanted Republican Mitt Romney to take the White House.
And a reminder, we will continue to cover these races. Carl Domino doesn't have the money that Congressman Murphy has, but Carl Domino is a self-funder, keeping his name front and center. This is one of the races